All right. Well, so we're like 3 or 4 minutes after. Hopefully, Sean will join, or anybody else that is hoping to join this meeting. And I can't stand this.
You were going to say anyone else that's important.
Well, no, anybody. I was like looking at the list and trying to figure out who's not here, and it's just blowing my mind up. So can y'all see my screen here? It's
Yep.
got the MVP meeting. Okay. So Dennis is here today, and I mentioned to y'all last time that I want to keep Dennis in the loop because, as you all know, Dennis is pretty impressive with his marketing arm and reach, and so it just kind of helps us to have him in the loop. So he's going to be kind of here as a fly on the wall. So today's meeting, DNN MVP meeting, January 11th. So as far as the agenda, I'm going to go through, a couple announcements, some follow-ups from the last meeting, and then I'll do some ecosystem updates. And then I want to talk about the posting the meeting video like we had last month's DNN MVP meeting, and I posted it online. So I just want to kind of talk about that a little bit more. I think Ash may have some updates for us along pull requests, security, something like that. Then we will get updates and have open discussion again around these ecosystem advisory groups. And then we'll have the open session for, question and answer, just anything anybody wants to talk about. And Daniel has requested, if you saw on Facebook, and Daniel, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, I'm sure you'll go into all this, but a while back, Daniel posted a poll, so they were working on something. And people were voting on it about, themes, templates. And so he's going to do maybe a brief demo or something like that, depending on how much time we have. So I've slotted him there. So that's the flow here. So as far as announcements, again, welcome. It's awesome that you all are here. DNN Corp is still in transition. And by that, I mean, we're still, moving systems and things like that. Some are ahead of others. On the last meeting, we had a couple of items that you guys asked. One was, getting DNN software to run on HTTPS. So that was something that I think maybe Eric VB brought up, Mitchell chimed in, and the guy sent me some follow-up documents, and I did make that request in Jira and put the associated information that was sent over to me. Ash, do you have any, I don't know, do you want to comment on that, or are there any updates as far as the process of that?
Yeah, so it just needs to be prioritized and actually worked upon. So there is a little bit of backlog there. There are a few items that still needs to go through. So I do remember seeing it. So we'll definitely act on it pretty soon.
Okay. So
I think there's just one concern around the SEO and whatnot, because anytime you make URL changes, there's a slight possibility of losing SEO and things like that. We just have to make sure that none of that happens, and then we can make that change pretty quickly.
Actually, just to point out, you can run into quite a lot of problems there, and you can also run into a lot of problems with anything that you've iframed with external resources and things like that. So for us in big projects, and I mean DNN is a very, very big project, you're going to run into quite a few problems. So you have to go step by step.
Okay, that's a very good point, Daniel, and that's why we're kind of hesitant to kind of put our hands into it yet, because there are other things. Because this has been running like this forever, right? We brought it up last month, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to kind of jump it right away and try to fix it and break a bunch of things.
Yeah, it's kind of really important, but it's really, really actually hard to do, especially in a project this size, because it could be anything like Gravatar icons or something which suddenly stop working, which will just cost you time until you even realize it and fix it.
Yeah, I know one of the, as far as sign up for DNN Digest, that's like a Marketo form. And I think that may even be an iframe. I'm not sure. So
yeah, a bunch of those are all iframe sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Marketo, and now I think we're going to use HubSpot and things like that. So we do have a QA site, definitely there, and we're going to do our testing there, and that'll be a good thing for people to actually go in and document all of that what all needs to be tested as a sanity test anytime you do a mass change like that. So sounds like a small project to me then.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, I mean, so definitely would be some work involved, but I think the overall community would love if everything was on HTTPS, right? It would just
Okay.
be a good look for us.
DNN,
And then,
DNN Connect is on DNN Connect is on HTTPS.
gotcha. Way to rub it in our face, Peter. Probably got a couple thousand less pages and users, but maybe you guys can help us get it running on HTTPS.
we heard that item and we were like, okay, well, let's go beat them on this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because basically, even if you have a single image, which is included anywhere, which is not HTTPS, it will not load anymore once the site is HTTPS.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Just from experience, we get tons of tickets from our customers with this warning, the secure warning and things like that, especially with SSL offloading. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? In the end, right, you may see the browser will either not load the image, the page, it's important to do. I mean, we did it with a site that had 29,000 pages a couple months ago. There's ways to check it. And eventually you just have to make the decision that, okay, we're going to have to deal with little issues going afterwards. When you look at Google's recommendations and we've watched search traffic, the change is definitely seems to be worth the risk because of the fact that we're seeing traffic drop off and stuff like that. But Ash, I mean, if you guys need any assistance, there's a lot of us here that have done it repeatedly, and I'm sure we can help identify some quick ways to check, validate, automatically process the site and see what might be broken, etc.
did you guys see any slowness after putting HTTPS? Like more load on the server or something like that?
No.
More CPU? No?
Barely relevant nowadays.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, certainly will do. Thank you for the offer.
All right. Good deal. I think it'd be good if we can get that moving and MVPs can contribute, then the more the better. All right. So as far as ecosystem updates, I think in the last meeting, I had told y'all that, we updated the community showcase site. I didn't update this number. I think I've added a couple more. So we're up to 131. There are some really nice looking sites that people are submitting. And I'm going to mention this. So the DNN Digest, as you can see in this bullet point, goes out tomorrow. I'm going to mention that in the digest. Hopefully we'll get some more submissions there. But, I think the community is seeing that and kind of reacting, and there's some pretty good stuff going on there. Another thing I'd like to mention is that at DNN Summit at the on the second, it's not the end of day one, it's the end of day two, so it'll be after both keynotes are done. We're going to have an open forum, so a lot of people want to ask the CEO questions, right? And so we're going to have Andy Treba, Sean Walker, which I think Sean has joined the meeting now. Or am I wrong? Was I seeing things?
No, I'm here.
Oh, he's here. Okay. So Andy and Sean and Cassidy and Mitchell. Cassidy and Mitchell both, DNN Association, BOD, and very active in hosting the DNN Summit. We're going to be on a panel, and Dennis Shaw is going to moderate, and it's just going to be, just as you would imagine, an open forum where people can ask questions. So I just want to make y'all aware of that. If you have any questions, that may be a good, place to ask those questions. And also the EAGs are underway. So, for anybody who's on this meeting, you should be in an ecosystem advisory group. Most of you are. I'm not sure who is and who isn't. But the kind of the point of being an MVP is that we are leaders in the community, right? And that we're very active and contributing. So there is a lot of action going on, a lot of conversations in these ecosystem advisory groups. I've got one window open, which is nothing but 4 Slack tabs, which is Slack for every group. And you guys are in a lot of these groups. So, if you're not in a group, I would strongly encourage you to be in one of those groups at least, because there's going to be a lot of just activity and contributions and ways to lead the community that will stem from the advisory groups. The other thing is, David has created an @DNN Awareness Twitter account, and it's essentially going to be, searching DNN filters, and you can follow that if you want to stay up on the latest and greatest. And then another thing for anybody on here who is a vendor, internally we have shifted systems from the old DNN Corp to the new DNN Corp, and so over Christmas break there was like a hard cutoff. So one of the payments was late. All the payments were there and they've been accurate. It was just a little bit late. So we're getting those smoothed out. So just from my end, wanted to let y'all know about that. And most of y'all have been emailing me with any issues on the store. Are there any
question?
Go ahead.
I didn't understand something. You said something about an old DNN Corp and a new DNN Corp. Now, just sounded like you changed companies but kept the name. Is that happening?
So DNN Corp was recently acquired, and so just like let's just imagine like the old Salesforce, we now have a new Salesforce, and so we have new data, and so the old payment system is now a new payment system. So I don't read me the wrong way. We're just using migration of data in between systems from what used to be to what is now. So nothing, no red flags. It's just just like you're doing a site migration. There's kinks to be worked out.
Yeah.
So are there any ecosystem updates that I have failed to list here that you guys think we should convey or communicate? Awkward silence. The ecosystem manager ought to know about them, right? All right, well, feel free to pipe up if you have any. All right, so now I want to have a discussion here. Last MVP meeting, we just said, hey, let's post it online, and we did. And, I think there's benefits to doing that. We can obviously show community activity. We can promote any content that we create, whether it's a video, a blog, or whatever. It helps us, have content that we can share, and it will promote the MVP group. But at the same time, there's a concern that like, hey, if we're going to be posting MVP meetings online, then maybe I don't want to give ultra critical feedback because my boss may see it or some vendor may see it or whatever. So I guess my suggestion would be that one meeting per quarter, we have an open session, right, where we obviously record the meeting and, we just run through the meeting as we would. And then if there's anything that we need to discuss in a closed session, I could stop recording and then we can post that outwardly so that the community and ecosystem will see, hey, there is an MVP group. They are meeting, they are discussing things, and hopefully it would encourage people to want to be, in the meeting. So that way we can, both promote, but at the same time, not stifle people from having candid feedback. So what are your thoughts about, posting one meeting per quarter, the open portion of a meeting?
I think it's a great idea.
All right, anybody? Okay, so it looks like some people are chatting here. Let me look in the chat. Or are y'all just cracking jokes in the chat here? Okay. Stroll is not a fan of making the meetings private. So yeah, I guess it's trying to, walk the fine line of, being open and transparent, but yet not, creating an environment where people won't, give their, input or whatever.
Yeah, I think, basically, the more open we are, our core concern is that people actually feel us doing something and feel like this is a group that's doing something. So I think that's the good thing of publishing. Core concerns, of course, are, let's say somebody has a problem with a specific vendor and he would not want to mention it because he doesn't want to feel like he's blacklisting somebody.
Yeah.
But then again, I would actually say go for open. I think we have so little to lose at the moment and so much to gain that, yeah.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we say we will post every meeting, and then at the end of every meeting, I'll just stop recording and we'll say, all right, is there any, I don't know, closed.
Yeah, that sounds like a better idea. That way you can have both.
Okay. All right, so I will update this so that I won't forget it. I appreciate the feedback. So we'll say post all meetings.
Mhm.
All right, and this is just for me, so I won't forget. All right, I appreciate the feedback on that. And if anybody, still has strong opinions about this, feel free to email me afterwards. All right, so now, Ecosystem Advisor Group updates. We will get updates from each leader here. I'll turn it over, but I do want to say, guys, there's a lot of stuff going on in these groups, and I think there's going to be some pretty big, projects stemming from this groups. And all of the leaders are going to give updates, but I will say that Andy, our CEO, has, tasked us with coming up with, hey, what does each group want? How can we help provide resources to make it happen, and how can we measure it? So it's very action oriented, and I think there's going to be some good stuff to come from this. So Sean, I will turn it over to you, and if any of you guys want to share your screen, just let me know. I will mute out here, Sean.
Sorry, unmute. There we go. And I don't know. Oh, video. There we go. Okay. So in terms of the that I'm involved with, I'm very grateful to Clint for setting up the Slack channel, which you set up a couple days ago this week. Have our first meeting scheduled for next week. I'm completely buried with other stuff lately, so I have not been able to get that particular group moving. And I'm completely buried today, and that's why I'm kind of distracted. Because we have a release tomorrow of product.
Sean, I think your audio may have dropped and your video froze up just for a second. What was that last point you made?
I don't really have any more of an update than that. My apologies.
Okay. Yeah, so no worries. Like Sean said, he's been kind of buried, and we are just now getting fired up in the technology. It's like anybody who's a member of that group is seeing the conversations going on there. So, they'll have the first meeting next week, and hopefully some good stuff to come from there. All right, Mr. Donker, do you want to share your screen?
Sure. If you guys want to see something, let me see if I can share my screen here. That's oh yeah, there we go. It's the why they color that differently, I do not know that button. Anyway, so frantically clicking away all the porn and going straight to this. So yeah, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. Well, that's a relief. Grow number of active developers using DNN. That's still the mission. So I hope that doesn't change every month. Focus on documentation, tooling, and awareness. And I've been looking into metrics over the past few weeks, and I thought I'd share that with you actually, because making use of our time a little bit here. So there are two primary places where I want to get metrics on developers, and they are GitHub and Stack Overflow. Now for GitHub, I ran some analysis, and this is the result of that analysis in a chart. So this is in gray the number of projects created with tagged .NET Nuke or with .NET Nuke in the description per quarter. As you can see, there's not really like a huge pattern. There's a bit of an outlier on the first quarter of 2014, which is the first bar there. But that could well be migration or something. People migrating from what was the old thing again? I can't remember even the Microsoft thing. Anyway, everyone's on GitHub now. Yeah, thank you. And now we're off to now we're all on GitHub, and as we can see, we're roughly over already for more than a year at like between 20-25 projects a quarter that are starting, and in yellow is all the projects that actually have releases, which is all going to be just a fraction of those. We will be more vocal about this in the future. We will give guidance on how to make sure that your project actually appears on this. To calm anyone's fears, too sexy content is on this one actually. So saw that one come by in my statistics. But it means that in GitHub there's just a couple of tricks, but you can add a topic at the top, and if you would use just .NET Nuke one word for the topic, then it will appear in my stats. And what I intend to do is hopefully create an extract on the DNN site, which displays this data live, and we can keep track of new projects being created, new releases being created, whatever. The other thing is Stack Overflow. So in blue, the number of discrete users that are posting questions, and in orange, the number of questions. As you can see, they're pretty close together. So usually just one question per person. And what is not shown here is that desperately few of these questions are actually getting answered. So this is another issue to address, and this will require a wider discussion. A discussion is going to happen within the dev team, but also, my guess is also that this team is a good place to discuss this, which is whether we should, to what degree we should enforce or encourage developers to use Stack Overflow rather than the DNNsoftware.com forums to post questions about development issues. Obviously, there are huge benefits in terms of SEO if we go to Stack Overflow. And I also think there are big benefit. Well, put it this way: SEO is the wrong term. I would like to be more visible as a technology to other developers, and I think Stack Overflow is a great way to achieve that. And secondly, the technology there is vastly superior to our forum technology for developer Q&A. So I will, one of my wishes is to see us gradually migrate there for anything for developers. So yeah, that's I think I have to. I'll cut it off there. This is part of my presentation for Andy coming up this next week. But that's, these are some of the thoughts. Projects underway currently include a Yeoman template being done by Matt Rutledge, off the top of my head. I've been working on this. Some of you may have been aware of that. I guess you can see a browser window, which takes like forever to start up. Yeah. There you go. And so this is a website in desperate need of some CSS love, for which I've thrown out a fish in my group to see who will want to take that. But it basically does what MSDN does. So if I go for, give me something security. aspects of a security namespace, for instance. If I go to that namespace, then I will find, PC seems to be running awfully slow with this Zoom thing happening at the same time.
I think it's the SSL you got on there.
That must be it. Good one. So yeah, I mean, there's a the idea, and this is what I've been working on for a while, is that we can actually keep track of the dynamics of our API. This will also, I should actually show that maybe. So when we go to, you can see that there are some labels here deprecated and removed. They go beyond the client dependency thing. But if I go to DNN persona bar, boom. Where are we? Here we go. There's one that's deprecated. We go here. Then it should give me some info at least on these are like the deprecation messages that have been sent out back in the day, and when they were labeled deprecated. So they were labeled deprecated already in 6.0, which is from the point that I started with this project, because it's all C# and not VB. But you know, all of this, it will give you an idea of how our API has evolved, and I hope that with DNN Corp we can get also clearer documentation for when things are deprecated and when they're removed, and a more predictable pattern for the future, because I think that's something that is going to be more and more pertinent to us as we try to kind of revise the API. So yeah, that's, you know, been working on that. You actually get code blocks as well, right? So you can actually check out the source code of the whole platform and see how it changed over time as well. So anyway, so that's a little project in the documentation part. In the tools part, we've got our Yeoman templates initiative happening, and in the awareness part, I mean that's overlaps of course with Will's work. So that's mostly in conjunction with Will, but we're looking at how to ensure that we're present at conferences and other things, for instance, being, you know, having more content on YouTube. Those are a couple of angles that we got. And just like the tech group, we'll have our first meeting next week. We have our Slack group already set up where, you know, lively discussions are happening, but we'll have a meeting next week as well. I think that's about it. I kind of rambled through what we're doing.
Gotcha. So Peter, I got a question. You said you kind of casted the debate out there, so to speak, to see if anybody would fight on the theming of this. Has anybody agreed to work on this, or do you need?
Not yet. There's no one yet that has volunteered to kind of make this whole website more visually coherent. Let's say I'm perfectly happy to tweak all the code, etc., to make things better. But I'd love someone with a fresh pair of eyes to kind of look at the UI aspects of this. And the other thing I threw out there was debate, and I think that's for this group, is forums for developers. Do we ice them, or do we stick a message at the top saying please post your questions on Stack Overflow, or do you feel that actually we should keep our discussions on the forums in terms of development questions?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and like you said, there are SEO implications, but there are also like considerations for like a newbie who wouldn't know to go to Stack Overflow, and I do want to have that conversation, but let's table that until we get maybe a little bit down the road, because there may be conversations about, the website in general, right?
Right.
So appreciate that update. All right. So
One thing I just wanted to mention. So we mentioned metrics and the collection of Stack Overflow and GitHub metrics. So one thing that I had talked to Clint about is we had developed for the Hotcakes open source community some tools so that we can aggregate metrics from not just our own site, but third-party services. And we actually built connectors for GitHub and for Stack Overflow. They might not be exactly what we need, but we have like a whole framework for doing it so that you could create new providers easily. And it's like runs on a daily basis and just aggregates results. And I think that's something that could be used probably across all the teams. To collect whatever the metrics are that you want to measure your team on.
Yeah.
And Will had reached out to me last week about whether that IP could be used, by DNN. And so I talked to folks internally here, and I believe that we announced at the conference that we're going to donate a lot of those. We're going to open source them and make them available to DNN for use.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be great. All right. I think next up was Mr. Stroll, Mr. No Pain, No Bacon, Mr. Dog in the Lap.
Yeah, it's not my dog, but he's a little handful. He likes to play. Dog sitting for, actually, many of you know her, Cody. She's been to the conferences over the years. Yeah, so we had, well, I guess I can show my screen, but there's only a few things to talk about. I mean, we've done a lot, and we're putting our videos online. Our video is already online for the last meeting. Am I clicking the right button? Yes, I did. All right, cool. Yeah, so basically, we as leaders, we all had a meeting with Andy, and then my meeting with my team, our group, the awareness group, was the day after, and so we reviewed the things that were discussed then. And so basically, I presented like kind of a laundry list of, we want to do all of this, but eventually, right? and so we kind of boiled it down to three things. And so what Andy asked is for us to formalize the group strategy, prioritize the activities, and then set requirements, budgets, and whatnot. So Clint kind of mentioned some of that. And so then I presented that to our team and got some people to take ownership of certain things. Let's see here. What's the relevant things? So as a group, for our group, kind of the strategy is we want to directly reach out and recruit new community members, obviously, but it's a two-pronged approach. We also want to reward and empower our existing community members, so that way they can become the brand advocates, and so we can duplicate our efforts across the community, right? So the things that the awareness group is charged with shouldn't be only the people in that group doing it, right? Like we're not gonna be the only people blogging. We're not gonna be the only people creating videos and so on. We're not gonna be the only people speaking and attending conferences. So it's basically helping to, create that amplifier approach. I've been calling it I've been calling it snowball approach, right? So like at the top of the hill, the snowball's small and it rolls down the hill, it gets really, really big like in the cartoons, and it runs over Wile E. Coyote. That's what I'm looking at, right? So these are the first things that we're going to work on. And so some of the stuff, Peter, that you showed, like that would be great stuff to include in this. So it would be cool to, I don't know if you can send me a copy of that deck, because I'd like to show that. I got a couple people that are already, thank you, that are already interested in taking that on as their project. So that will help them understand some of the information that we can use, and we can use that for planning. So we're gonna have this is not in lieu of by the way, the dashboard is not in lieu of like a leaderboard, and it's not meant for that. The community activity health dashboard is basically more of a thing where we're trying to make sure that we're tracking our progress as a community, but especially in terms of what our groups are doing, because the awareness group, we want to be able to say, what, we're having an impact, and this is the impact we're having, whether or not that's positive or negative. Right, and so that's what the dashboard is, and that's going to basically kind of overlap to everybody's activity, right? So yeah, and we want that to be public and visible for everybody, so everybody's accountable for it, right? And then create a speaker program and portal for that. So, the idea behind that is it's kind of inspired by Ineta, if anybody remembers that, but having a place for speakers to say, hey, I'm willing to speak at places. And then also rewarding speakers with some sort of stipend when they go to a user group or a conference. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a DNN user group or a DNN conference. It could be anything, anywhere. And then also providing a way for folks to create and upload resources for other people to take advantage of. So like having some canned presentations, like here's a slide deck and an abstract and maybe some sample code or whatever's related to that particular session. And so, speakers or prospective speakers or maybe user group leaders, like they can pick that up and take it and run with it. So having that kind of resource for them. So it's kind of like matchmakers for DNN speakers, right? Or match or whatever. So and then reviving the user group program, and so creating that module that used to exist before, except we're reimagining it. That's something I actually, as a passion project, had already started months ago, maybe over a year ago. And so we've already had a lot of traction on that historically, and so we have basically all the wireframing for it is already done. We're at the point to where we can actually start like design and development. And so we got owners for all of these and some other things as well. So let me move on to and so one of the things that we review in each of our meetings is what we need to get done by the next month, next meeting, and next quarter. And so we're going to try to keep track of that. But the dashboard is meant to keep track of that as well when we get that done. And so we have champions for several areas now. So and you can see the various people that are championing these different things. And so we've assigned ownership to these different items, and continuing on in future meetings, we're going to continue to see, like, okay, what kind of traction have we had on this over that period of time, and everybody's going to have their ability to, to be accountable for it and report on it and whatnot. So that's basically it. We're going to continue to keep this ball rolling every month.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Will. On the theme creation, you got Tracy and Lucas there. Maybe they could create a theme for Peter's site. Maybe there might be some overlap there. Have to see about that.
Actually, that's not a bad idea, because theme creation, I think I may have mentioned this in previous meeting, but we are severely lacking in terms of open source themes out there, right? We don't have nearly as many as we need, and we don't have as many theme creators. And so that's that particular item is to inspire other people to use DNN, because there's a lot of really good quality themes already out there without having to pay for it, and then getting more theme developers interested in doing it for DNN.
Yeah, especially themes that are easily adaptable or easily to understand by someone, to say, okay, I can grab this and then do X, Y, and Z with it and tweak it to my liking.
Yeah, because that actually has a lot to do with awareness too. I mean, we also published like 1 or 2 themes, but basically without a lot of instructions and manuals for people to get started. They don't really know what to do, compared to the purchase themes, which usually have quite extensive documentation, because those guys don't want to do support. And so that's kind of tricky. So whoever publishes a theme should actually also invest a lot of time to communicate and document to get it useful.
Yeah.
And his name's Pickle. He enjoys seeing you guys. and I think he's a Lhasa Apso or so. Oh no, he's a Shih Tzu. I'm sorry, he's a Shih Tzu.
Well, no cuss words on MVP meetings. Thanks.
Bless you,
David. David, we're turning it over to you, sir. Thanks, Will.
Excellent. Well, let's see. In the partners group, we've gotten things going with with our initial meeting, which was actually the day of the meeting with Andy. And so really kind of got the ball rolling and getting some dialogue started. We got started up on the Slack workspace for them. As I mentioned last time, it's a pretty diverse group. So there's a lot of perspectives that are differing, that people are coming from. So a lot of the conversation so far has really been around the definition of the partner program itself, being the traditional partner program. So that's definitely one of the areas of focus that we're going to have over the coming weeks. Also, there's been some talk about the DNN store and the need for a marketplace in that area. So definitely a lot of thought going into that as to what the strategy for that may be going forward. And the third area that not a whole lot of conversation really has happened with it yet, but it's kind of, if you read between the lines, there's this need for a clear kind of ecosystem points system or rewards type system to really kind of gauge what all is going on in the ecosystem and how that ties into where people are as a partner, and the type of partner they are. So it's interesting to hear all the perspectives, a lot of history, obviously, and a lot of the conversation. But it's going in the right direction, and looking forward to pitching those three areas to Andy specifically whenever we meet with him next. I think it's in 2 weeks, or a little bit less than 2 weeks now.
Yep. Gotcha, Dave. So does that complete your update, Dave?
It does. I'm not the fancy presentation guy like these other guys. They're making me look bad.
No worries. And just to give you guys insight, I may have stated it up front earlier. I'm not sure, but the ecosystem advisory group leaders had a meeting with Andy, and he, like I said, told them to kind of boil down what their requests were. And then we're having that follow-up meeting, and that's what David's referring to, and Will and Peter, and that is happening next week. So I think we will maybe get some marching orders here soon as far as like which task we're going to try to attack. And then once those are selected, I feel like we'll have more meat to chew on here in these meetings as well. Okay, all right. So I think, glance at the PowerPoint, the next item up was the open session, which is going to start with Mr. Daniel Metler. So Daniel, if you see, there should be a share screen button down there, and you just click on it.
Okay, actually I don't see one, but maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Will Stroll can help you locate it.
it's the green button because they colored it differently.
Yeah, when you complained about it appears on the screen. That happened to me last time.
Okay. Good. So I presume everybody can see my screen now.
I just see a lot of colors.
Yeah, that's our thing. Okay. So basically, the question I already posted on Facebook was a problem we're running into quite frequently right now, and that is if you have any kind of component that you made that you're distributing, if the other person has a theme or a skin which uses any kind of CSS framework, it would of course be nice if the components would already know about that and be able to adapt to that. And I find it strange that actually nobody has actually addressed this yet, because I find it a very big issue. What I see a lot is that some vendors like Mandeeps or something will just have their own way of doing things, and of course their components will then look okay within their skins. But once you leave that, they'll start doing various things. You'll end up having websites loading Bootstrap multiple times, having contradicting classes and things like that. And the point actually why this started becoming important to us is because Bootstrap 4 is coming. And just as we're moving forward, we're kind of like having to make our components compatible to both frameworks. And I've talked to other people who are using, let's say, 2Sexy apps, for example, with sometimes very obscure frameworks I've never heard of. And so the core question is there a good way that we can make sure that this just works? And also because of experience of people trying to make things too good, I'm trying to look for a solution that is very minimal, kind of like something that just explains how it should be done, which has like a prototype how it works, but which will not really force anybody to do it exactly the way we do it. So this is the core idea. I'm basically just going with you through the blog post I'm preparing because I want to publish this once I get some more feedback. But basically, in most cases, if we look at modern CSS frameworks, the HTML doesn't have to change much anymore. You just need a different include, and you probably typically need different class tags. That's like 80% of the work in the output. So here's just an example. In Bootstrap 3, you'd have these classes. In Bootstrap 4, you'd have some other classes. And basically what we've already developed internally is a mechanism to do all this. Now, my biggest concern is actually to provide something like a very simple mechanism that doesn't bloat the HTML in the templates, because it has to stay readable. So this is just a short example. I'm going to quickly go through a little bit more of what I've been considering. I think the most important thing we have to solve is if the skin, I mean, basically the skin has to publish what framework it's using. It has to like say, okay, this is a bootstrap situation, or this is a skeleton situation, so that things can pick it up. And however it communicates that, these names, of course, should be globally standardized, because if let's say one skin says I have BS3 and the other one says I have Bootstrap 3, then of course the layout couldn't figure out what's supposed to be used. And so the skin would then have to broadcast this somehow. And this should be very simple to do. And the components would have to pick this up somehow. Say, okay, look, this is the value that was currently in the current request. And then it has to be able to modify itself a little bit, mostly in terms of CSS classes. So far, everybody more or less figured it out, or am I going too chaotic?
I think you're good.
Okay. So a few core concerns I'd like to make sure that we're covering as well before we even start solving something is it should work with DNN 7+. That's for me a core point, because if it doesn't, the adoption rate is going to be so slow that people won't like it. It also has to work with web forms today and tomorrow with non-web forms. So in other words, also, no matter how it's hosted, it should work, because basically everything we do today, if we contribute anything, it should kind of be ready for .NET Core. Anything else, I think, wouldn't make that much sense. Of course, it should work no matter which CSS framework is being used, even if people are using their own frameworks or not using a CSS framework. And somehow it should also work that if the skin would support this, but the components don't, it shouldn't interfere, and the other way around as well. And what I've basically done is we've actually created a DNN component now which does all this. The trivial solution is this, that somewhere in the current request, we have to set, let's say, a global variable or something which contains a code to say what it is. And this has to be picked up, and that's kind of it. But it all sounds like very trivial, basically. And what I would appreciate is if one or two of you, or 3 or 4, would chime in to like discuss this more in depth with me and give it a test and see what it feels like, if it feels like it's okay. So we have all the code already. We're actually trying to use it in production already on 2 or 3 of our solutions, but I just need external input. Yep.
Yeah, so I reacted to your post quite quickly as well, because at the beginning you said, "I'm surprised no one has ever touched on this," and it happens to be one of my pet peeves, actually, clashes of CSS frameworks, because as a module developer, for a long time, I've wanted to use, and I have used Bootstrap in modules, because I'm like, screw it, I want stuff to look nice. I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Plus, the DNN classes are way too limited to make stuff look nice. Basically, I think the DNN UI thing that we had going since DNN 6, I believe it was, is a good illustration of what we should probably not be doing, because I think we're continuously behind the curve with these things, and I applaud the intention that was behind it, which is can we unify the look of modules and the skin, modules across the site, and I think that's a great goal. But I think we should acknowledge that this is just beyond us, because as soon as you get into, the specifics, like I'm doing specifically a module, and things get complex very quickly, and all of a sudden I realized that whatever was dreamt up at the time by Ian Robinson and Kung Dang.
Yeah.
And oh god, those names came back. They had the best of intentions as well, but they couldn't dream of all the scenarios that I was going to implement in the module. So I think for me, I'm happy to do away with that. Now, as I pointed out in my reaction to your post, there is a mechanism actually for a skin to tell everyone what framework it's using. The only thing is, it's currently resolved within the client dependency framework. So the client dependency. So just for those of you that don't know, the skin can say to the client dependency framework, "Here's Bootstrap, and it's version 3.3.6, and I wish to, for instance, optionally, they can say, I wish to override any other module that says, oh, by the way, I'm also using Bootstrap." Then similarly, a module can say, here's Bootstrap, I'm using Bootstrap, I'm using 3.3.7, and there you go, client dependency framework, do with it what you want. And so the client dependency framework will say, well, hang on, that clashes with the Bootstrap that was done by the skin. But if the skin was 3.3.6 and this is 3.3.7, I'm going to pump out 3.3.7 from the module for that page instead of 3.3.6. Unless the skin designer said, no, wait, I'm going to override. Because, for instance, they may have changed some of the primary colors or, whatever in the whole thing. It also takes care of the situation where, because this is agnostic to, you have a concept of a skin has a framework. This is actually agnostic to it. It says, for any CSS file that goes out there, maybe you want to throw out Bootstrap and jQuery UI for some reason because you've got some, you've got some components that are skinned that way, and you want to mix and mash with these things. So that takes care of it at a different level, at let's say a lot less invasive manner, because I think what you're suggesting is that our module code needs to adapt to be aware of the skin framework, and then we include some magic code so that our CSS classes are correct. Is that correct?
More or less, yes. Because from what I see, for example, if a component would just always enforce to include Bootstrap 3 and it runs into a Bootstrap 4 scenario, well then, if the framework just injects both, first of all, you have clashing colors, clashing whatevers, and clashing spaces in the floating parts and all that. And I think that's just not the way it's going to work in the long term. And right now, Bootstrap 3.4 is going to be a very big change. This is where it's going to hit a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think all the vendors are still using Bootstrap 3, or most of them. But also, again, anybody creating an open source component, skin, he's always going to be thinking, well, they're going to kind of be afraid to use newer frameworks because all the components will actually start to cause trouble.
Exactly. I mean, basically, I started this work when it was a 2 to 3 conversion from Bootstrap, with a similar challenge. The thing is that at the end of the day, of course, there is no generic way in which you can solve any old clash, because these frameworks are so very specific in the way they work. So any proposition that you make is likely to target specifically the way in which Bootstrap works in its classes. You could have classes that shift from different elements, for instance, from frameworks, right?
Exactly, and that's kind of like why my core solution should actually just primarily handle the question of communicating which framework is in use and receiving that again.
So the client dependency framework has a list of what's going on.
because I'm just guessing that then the theme, well, the component designers could then start based on that, decide what kind of APIs would make sense to do it without basically breaking the core functionality. I would kind of like to say this is like just a very first step in this whole chain.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be additional tooling which helps, but that would not be part of the core definition yet.
Yeah. So, my feedback would be instead of rather than having an extra API layer, would it not be possible to leverage what is in the client dependency framework to give you as a module developer enough info to do this?
I don't know. Maybe we'll handle that separately and just look into that for bilaterally. Would anybody else be interested in at least looking at the stuff? And because I'm kind of
I would definitely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think it's a really big thing if we can solve. Would make third-party module stuff a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Mitchell and Peter can look at it, Daniel, and then maybe further the conversation in the developers group. I think all of you are in the developers group, right?
I think I am.
Yeah. So anyways, Daniel, appreciate the quick run through of that. I do want to kind of be respectful of everybody's time. We're kind of at the hour. Are there any closing remarks or questions that anybody has, for the crew here?
Stop recording.
You want me to stop recording? Okay, hold on one sec.
It's not for me, it's for whoever else.
Oh, but all of you guys are aware that DNN Connect picked the location, right? I don't know if we got to say that last time. So we picked a location.
I
Indeed.
I do actually have a very quick poll to make. You guys don't have any questions. So with all this integration, as Clint was saying, we're trying to move, like Git, doesn't affect DNN soft, like open source stuff. We moved our ticketing system to ESW. We moved Salesforce. We're trying to move portion of at least the private repo of our GitHub. Now there's an opportunity to keep using our current Jira, or use the issue management on GitHub. Do you guys has anybody used GitHub issue management, like the project management aspect, not only just the issue management? Any suggestions, any thoughts? So we can continue using Jira we have today.
From a community perspective, I think the use of GitHub encourages people to give back. It makes it easier for, it's faster for somebody that is contributing to fix in a pull request to be able to associate their branch to a particular fix, which I think would simplify some of the things that we're doing from we don't need you to make a pull request, but you also need to have a Jira ticket. I think there's some stuff there. I don't necessarily know if it has as robust of, sprint planning and other tools, which I'm not sure if that's being used internally. But I think from what I've seen in terms of getting people involved in open source, a lot of the projects are getting a lot of activity. I'm pretty active in the Microsoft ones for all of the .NET Core stuff. And it does seem to really make it easier to quickly get contributions. Anyway.
Yeah, I think, quick contribution is great. But I think in terms of, for example, working on a large project, like when there's an epic, there's a story, kind of breaking it down. I don't know if you guys have any experience there or not.
I think I can add something there, because I've been doing all of my stuff with Too Sexy there, and we've run through about, let's say, 1,200, 1,300 issues. And what is really great is the coding side, because you can always reference an issue from a code commit and all that. So the coder has a really good experience, but in terms from management, not really that great.
Yeah, for example, how do you expect the QA to close an issue, right?
Say again?
How do you expect QA to close an issue, right? If it's not in their queue, something like that.
Yeah, they have very simple Kanban boards, which you can create your own lanes and things like that. But again, it's much more limited. Really, the project management part is fairly trivial.
Okay.
But given that they have an accessible API, that could always be layered on top with other tooling.
Yes, I believe there are third-party tools which build on that and reference all that. I've just never used that, but I believe it is because it's very open. And the other fact that people do love to contribute, that you don't have to create another login just to add a comment and mention something.
Yeah.
I think that does lower the bar a lot for people to contribute.
Yeah, and don't forget, then you don't have a different login either, because that annoys the hell out of me. The fact that I have different logins in these systems, and that I'm responsible as an end user to keep these things in sync just baffles me. So from that perspective, and the perspective, of course, of metrics, I mean, it's very easy then for us to abstract metrics from the entirety of the whole project. I think that's a bonus as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
There's ones like Clubhouse IO is an example of a lightweight tool that integrates with GitHub that would allow, with like a public repository, for you to inject QA processes where you can actually manage the state of items that's not directly tied to GitHub. We've been using that for some of our open source stuff because we use Clubhouse to manage all of our other stuff. It's pretty slick, and it bridges the gap a little bit and gives you, epics and abilities to do a little bit more on that, and keep it seamless to where your end users don't know, or the community wouldn't even need to know.
That looks pretty good, actually, Clubhouse.
It's amazing because for smaller teams, it's free. For me, it's been a lifesaver for us because we have many clients, and it's about the only tool out there that we can have a true, story process across multiple clients at the same time without having to switch.
That may be an ask for the developers group, Donker. Access to a subscription for that.
Yep.
Well, and it would be free if we wanted to use something like that for the open source side of things. I think it'd get a little bit mucky with their licensing rules, but I know that for open source stuff, they're really pretty open about it.
Exactly.
Sweet.
Cool.
And they respond great to technical support issues.
Thank you.
David has posted some stuff in the chat here, some other tools, so we can look at those. All right, any other comments, remarks before we end the meeting?
No.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody's time, and we will see you, let's see, is next month, maybe at the same time as DNN Summit. I'm gonna have to look at the date. I may move the meeting. If I do, I'll obviously update the invite. Anyways, appreciate it, guys. We'll see y'all online. Thanks.
Good. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.